So let's take a look. The Big Ten has a chance to send 7, 8, or maybe 9 teams to the big dance later next month. A few weeks ago, the Gophers, they were in that picture, but that hope quickly fading away the last few games, especially after last night. Minnesota losing their 4th straight to Northwestern, dropping them to 6-11 conference play and 13-11 overall. So what does that have to do with maybe the last 4 in? Well, senior college basketball writer Jerry Palm's been breaking it down, constantly changing the past few weeks with teams winning and losing, of course. As Oregon out of the Pac-12 coming off that win last night against Stanford. How about Michigan State in the week they've had? Can't count them out. A huge win over number 4 Ohio State, along with Western Kentucky and Georgia Tech also pushing it. Let's bring in the mad scientist behind the bracketology, our Jerry Palm, and let's look at the last 4 in for you. Has a chance to basically push in after looking at their resume and schedule the rest of the way here, Jerry.
Yeah, well, for Michigan State, I mean, a week ago they weren't on the bubble. Now they win at Indiana, they beat Illinois, now they're on the bubble. Then they beat Ohio State last night, and that's all in the span of about 6 days. And now they're actually in the field for now. 13-9 overall. Some big wins. Those are 3 of their 4 best wins this season just in the past week. And so Michigan State is peaking at the right time. They've got a schedule that is still somewhat daunting. They've got to go to Maryland. They get Indiana at home, who should be desperate. And then they finish home and home with Michigan before the Big Ten tournament. So Michigan State's not out of the woods, but boy, this week was a real step in the right direction. And they always say don't count out Tom Izzo in March. And oh, wait, it's still February.
Yeah, the closer we get, yeah, you're right. You can't count out Tom Izzo there. You mentioned the daunting schedule there with Indiana, then 2 back-to-back with Michigan. If they're able to split maybe those 2 in Indiana, can we say maybe they might squeeze into that field later in March?
If they can win the Maryland and Indiana games, they don't have to worry as much about the 2 Michigan games then. They're in a much more comfortable position entering the conference tournament. But you can't analyze a bubble team in a vacuum because you might think you've done enough, and then somebody wins some random team wins a conference tournament and steals a bid, and what you did is no longer enough.
Okay, Michigan State, one of those staples in the postseason. Let's look at your first 4 out. You have a few there in UNC and Duke. How about those 4?
Yeah, so North Carolina and Duke. I mean, North Carolina took a bad loss this week at home to Marquette, their worst loss of the season. And that's unfortunate because they've got some nice wins, but really the only win they have over a team that's likely to make the field is the 45-point win over Louisville from last weekend. But, other than that, their losses aren't that bad. The NC State loss, not so great. The Marquette loss is worse. It's just, this is a really pedestrian tournament resume, and they need some spice to it. And I don't know when they're going to get a chance to do that because the ACC is not providing that many opportunities like they normally do. Duke is going to have the same problem. They're on a winning streak, but now they need more quality wins, and where are those coming from?
Be interesting to see because they both play each other at the end of the season. If one can get in over the other, be interesting to see who's heading from NC there into the tournament. Looking at some of those top 4 seeds, you still have Ohio State on that line. Did that loss open the door maybe for Illinois, maybe when we're talking top 4 seeds in the country?
It could have if anybody behind them had won this week. But, Ohio State lost to Michigan State. Illinois lost to Michigan State. Oklahoma lost. Alabama lost. Villanova was the only team I had on the 2 line that won. But Villanova hasn't had enough of a chance to build a resume to compete for the 1 line yet. So the teams on the 2 line are largely the same. West Virginia replaced Oklahoma, but Illinois still 5, Alabama still 6. So it was really, the gap between number 3 and the rest of the field got larger this week, but the teams immediately behind them didn't change.
Let's look at the Pac-12 for a second. A few teams that knocking on the door here. The Bruins, they've won 4 straight. Colorado coming up big. Oregon as well, putting some W's on the resume. Over under how many teams can we see from that conference representing the field of 68?
Yeah, well, USC is the one that's most comfortably in, and now UCLA looks pretty good too with this relatively recent hot streak. Colorado got a huge win last night to complete the season sweep of USC. They've got 3 bad losses, so they've got kind of a quirky resume. But the sweep of USC is going to make them a lot more comfortable now if they don't go ahead and give that away. Oregon still has some work to do because their best win is the home win over Colorado. They have a home and home split. They only played USC once. They lost that game. They haven't played UCLA at all. Had both of those games postponed, but one of them will get made up next week at Oregon. So that's a good opportunity for them. But if they don't beat USC and they don't beat UCLA, they're going to have a nervous selection Sunday.
Nice little push between the Bruins and Trojans there, as you mentioned. Let's get to the business side a little bit, Jerry. The NCAA outlining their COVID contingency plan for next month. All the teams running down there in Indianapolis. What can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so the contingency plan, there's two parts of it. There's before the tournament's announced and after. And if a team is, an automatic qualifier can't play before the tournament's announced, the conference can replace that team. And if an potential at-large team can't play, then they just need to let the committee know so they don't put them in the bracket. Once the bracket's announced, there's a 48-hour window to replace teams. If a one-bid league loses its team, that league can replace it. And it'll go into the bracket in the same spot. If an at-large team or a multi-bid league loses a team, one of the first four out will replace that team. Whatever the highest ranked one replaces that team in the same spot of the bracket. So once the bracket's announced, the bracket is set. And if somebody has to vacate it, then the replacement goes into that same spot. After 48 hours, it's done. No more replacements. If somebody's out, it's just not a forfeit, but the team that's still there advances. It's no contest, and you just end up with a hole in the bracket, and hopefully that won't happen. But we need contingency plans because it's not realistic to expect the committee's going to be able to announce a 68-team field that they would want to announce with no replacements, and then nobody gets replaced and nobody has COVID problems, and we get 67 games as expected. That's not the way COVID has worked all season long.
In other words, a lot of moving pieces before we actually get to the tournament, and once we get there as well, a fluid situation. Jerry Palm is always breaking it down in the bracket, as well as giving us the latest news with the contingency plan there. Don't forget, check out the Iowa College Basketball Podcast. Catch our Matt Norlander, Gary Parrish breaking down, of course, the top four seeds. Michigan State's latest run, knocking off Illinois as well as Ohio State. Could they, one of the original Blue Bloods, get back into it? Download and subscribe and give the fellas a listen.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.